Come on, hurry up and buy dessert for me and Freddie. If you get something I don't like, you won't get off easy. Ever since my brother's family moved in with us, my standing in the family has only gotten worse. Especially my sister-in-law. She looks down on me and bosses me around. Is this my brother's fault? Or my parents'? Or, heaven forbid, mine? All I know for sure is that I've been sidelined by my family. It was the event that made me decide to break away from my family and live my own life. My name is Laura. I'm a 28-year-old single woman living at home. I work and sometimes help around the house, and on weekends I indulge in my hobbies and have a good time. I figure once I get married, I won't have this kind of freedom, so I'm enjoying my single life while I can. But my happy life was disrupted by an incident. That incident was my brother Edward, who married and left home 5 years ago, returning home with his wife Sharon and son Freddie. I've always had a hard time with Edward since we were kids. Especially in elementary school, Edward was the golden child, and I was always looked down on as a failure. Frustrated by this, I started studying hard and eventually began to do well. As a result, while I rose to positions like student council president, Edward became a delinquent and started skipping school. Edward and I always seemed to be at odds with each other. So when Edward told our worried dad James and mom Emma to stop bothering him and left home right after high school graduation, not going to college but getting a job, our home felt like a family of 3. 10 years after Edward left, he returned home once. Our parents, who had been worried sick, cried tears of joy at his return. But Edward, despite smiling, seemed to look down on us. Turns out he struggled in society but managed to start his own company and became the president. I was shocked to learn he had married Sharon and even had a child without us knowing. "Next time, bring your wife and grandson," Mom said tearfully. Despite nodding in agreement, it took Edward another 3 years to return. Since we hadn't exchanged contact information with Edward, we had no idea what he was up to. Still, when he returned with his family and their big luggage, our parents welcomed them with open arms and invited Sharon and Freddie into our home. In the living room, as they sat on the sofa, Dad prompted Edward for details. "What have you been up to all this time? You came 3 years ago, and then we lost touch again. It was lonely. Make sure to give us your contact this time." I've been so busy, always meaning to come back, but it's been tough. Every time I thought about a break, I was just too exhausted to move. Edward gave a wry smile, and Mom looked worried. "Is your job that demanding?" "Well, I have to support the company. There's a lot of responsibility with employees to look after. And, well, I've run into a bit of trouble." Edward glanced at Dad for a moment, looking apologetic. "What's up? Speak up. We haven't been able to do much for you, but from now on we're here to support you." "Thanks, Dad. It's hard to say, but my business took a hit, and I had to sell the house. I didn't want to live in a rental, so can we 3 stay here? Of course we'll pay rent. How about $2,000? At that, Mom's face lit up. "Of course there's no need to be so formal. As a president, you sure talk different figures. I haven't been able to be filial until now, so let me do this much." After saying that, Edward turned a kind smile towards me. "Laura, I'm sorry I left you alone with Dad and Mom. I'm here now, so you can relax." Uh-huh. All I could do was nod. Despite claiming their business was failing, my brother's family had nothing but luxury brands. Especially Sharon. She seemed to spend a lot on accessories, making it odd that they'd only sold their house. Maybe I'm just biased against Edward, leading me to these assumptions. It's not just that I don't have good memories of Edward. I remember him doing some really awful things. But we're adults now. We should be able to act with some sense. I decided to avoid interacting with my brother's family as much as possible. But since then, it's been the worst of times. My parents started to suck up to Edward's family, and Sharon's attitude grew increasingly overbearing. Their son, 5-year-old Freddie, became my responsibility whenever I was home on weekends. "Hey, take care of Freddie for me." "What?" "I'm sorry, but I have plans today." "Why? We're putting $2,000 into this house. James and Emma are so agreeable. Why do you have to be so difficult? I'll have you thrown out of this house." Sharon's sudden attitude change shocked me, and I ended up taking care of Freddie. But being treated like that by my own family, it just made living together more unpleasant. I immediately talked to Edward about Sharon's behavior. "Hey Edward, can't you do something about Sharon's attitude? She's like, because we're paying $2,000, don't rebel." "That's right, isn't it? I'm paying $2,000 so Dad doesn't oppose me, and Mom doesn't make Sharon do any housework. Laura, you should respect us the same way." I thought I misheard Edward for a moment. But no, my hearing was fine. Edward was seriously saying this nonsense with a straight face. That $2,000 is for Dad and Mom, not me. Want to give me an allowance too? No thanks. If this is what it leads to, there's no need to pay $2,000. It's creepy having a hierarchy in a family. Huh, okay, I'll talk to Sharon about it. I thought Edward understood my point, but I was wrong. The next month, Edward stopped contributing to the house altogether. Then, Sharon started bringing home expensive groceries every day and said to Mom, "Your daughter said we don't need to contribute to the house. That puts us in a bind, doesn't it? We only know how to live luxuriously, so our food expenses might be too much." Mom glared at me furiously. "Laura, apologize to Sharon. Beg Edward to start contributing to the house again. Honestly, you're just a burden staying here." I was stunned to be treated like this by my own mother. Then I was dragged by Mom to Edward and Sharon's room to apologize deeply. Thinking that maybe this would change my parents' attitude towards me, I gave Mom $2,000. But Mom looked at me like I was a fool, saying, "Don't strain yourself," without a second glance. Knowing my income, yet still thinking of me as lesser than Edward, was heartbreaking. After all, Edward came back home because his business was failing and he sold his house. I think I probably have more assets than him. That's when I decided to get a bit of revenge on my brother's family, who caused all this before leaving the house. From then on, I did whatever Sharon told me to. Mostly it was Sharon giving orders, probably manipulated by Edward behind the scenes. Sharon waited until I left my room to drop a vase in the hallway. In an instant, there was a loud crash, glass shards scattered, and water everywhere. And there were beautiful flowers scattered all around. "Oh no, the hallway is all wet because of Laura," Sharon yelled loudly, and then Mom came storming down the hallway, grabbing me by the collar and shouting, "What are you doing? You did this on purpose, didn't you? Just because you don't like Sharon, you can't tell right from wrong?" "It's not me, Mom. Stop it." No matter what I said, Mom wouldn't believe me and said, "I don't want to cook for someone who lies. Make your own dinner tonight. But don't you dare use the dining room, and clean up this hallway yourself." She looked at me with such disdain. Seeing Mom's eyes, I remembered my elementary school days. Whenever Edward got good grades, Mom would beam with pride. But if I didn't score perfectly, she'd look disappointed and say, "I can't expect much from you." Even after I started getting good grades, Mom never looked at me like that again. But now I realize she hadn't really changed. Maybe both Edward and I were victims. But that doesn't change the fact that Edward did terrible things to me, and even now he hasn't changed, trying to control this house as he pleases. I thought about reconciling with my family before cutting ties, but I realized it's impossible for me. I might be able to build a good relationship eventually, but the deep wounds I've suffered won't heal, and I can't bring myself to try that hard over a long span. I started preparing to leave the house immediately. As my status in the house dropped and Sharon looked down on me even more, she began ordering me around daily. Come on, go buy dessert for me and Freddie. If you get something I don't like, I won't let it go. What should I buy? Figure it out yourself. We only buy desserts from high-end patisseries. I'll be mad if you get something from a convenience store. Even though the rest of the family saw this, no one said a word. Even Freddie, who I initially thought was cute, would say things like, "Listen to Mama." While obeying Sharon and reflecting that children mirror their parents, a humiliating month passed. Then, one day after dropping Freddie off at preschool, Sharon brought 13 mothers of his friends home. Sharon gave Mom $500, saying, "Emma, could you please go out for a bit?" And Mom happily left. I was supposed to be at work, but I had a high fever this morning and had to call in sick. I had just returned from the doctor that morning and couldn't go outside, so I was at a loss. Sharon then told me, "You stay here and work. Hurry up and serve coffee for 14 people. If your coffee making skills are bad, I won't forgive you." And joined the mothers in the living room. I made coffee for everyone and brought it in several trips. Then Sharon started complaining. "Can't you move more efficiently? You're so useless." I'm sorry. My apology only made her angrier. "You'll eventually leave this house and become a stranger. Can't you at least try to be useful while you're here?" I'm sorry. I kept my head down apologizing. When one of the mothers, a woman, said, "Hey, Sharon, what are you making her do? You can't just yell at her and force her to apologize." I recognized her. She was a senior from my law school days. "Senior Lita?" As I said that, Senior Lita's face lit up with a bright smile. "It is Laura. It's been so long I can't believe we're meeting here." "It's been a long time. So, you're the mother of one of Sharon's child's friends? Your child must have grown up a lot." "Yes, indeed. We haven't been in touch for a while." As we were chatting, Sharon interrupted us. "Hey, don't just stand there chatting." Then Senior Lita, with a look of disbelief, ignored Sharon and asked me, "Laura, you're not working as a housekeeper here, are you?" "No, I'm the daughter of this house. Sharon is my brother Edward's wife. We're living together." "Ah, I see. You're not at work today?" "I'm feeling unwell. I just got back from the doctor." Hearing this, Senior Lita's eyes widened and then hardened. "Sharon, what are you making someone who's sick do? Even if she's family, that's not right. And you, behaving so arrogantly when you're the one living off others." Sharon, taken aback by being scolded, quickly retorted, "What? Why are you getting involved in our family matters? This is so inconvenient." Senior Lita sighed in exasperation. Well, with that attitude, it seems Sharon's the one in a precarious position. Anyway, we can't be here bothering someone who's ill. I hope you reflect on your actions today, Sharon. She then stood up, headed towards the entrance, and the other 12 mothers followed her out of the living room. Sharon glared at me, grabbed my collar, and shouted, "This is all your fault! You stopped them all!" But at that moment, my head throbbed painfully, my vision blurred, and I collapsed. When I woke up, I was lying in my bed. Mom sitting beside me, holding my hand. "Mom?" "Laura, I'm so sorry. Sharon left you there after you collapsed. I never thought she was like that. I'm really sorry for making you suffer." Mom apologized, but I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. Since Edward returned, I've been reminded of our childhood. Mom, you favored Edward when his grades were good, and then me when mine improved. Is all that matters to you excellence? No, it's not like that. Maybe in the past, yes. I didn't want to lose to my friends whose children were excelling. So it's just changed from test scores to how much money we bring into the house, right? I can't see you as my mom anymore. I shook off Mom's hand and sat up. That's not true. Mom's eyes filled with tears, but it was too late for regrets. Sorry, but I'm leaving this house. You can't treat Sharon like your daughter. I'm cutting ties with you. Please reconsider. We'll reflect on our actions. We'll take only $500 from Edward, just like you, and share housework equally to avoid any hierarchy. I wish you'd said that sooner. When Sharon broke the vase, you immediately took her side without listening to me. At that moment, I stopped considering you and this house as my family. That's not true. Mom covered her face with her hands, shocked, and started crying. I pressed on. When I was in elementary school and Edward was in middle school, he introduced me to one of his friends and told me to date him. I refused, but Edward grabbed me by the collar and threatened in a scary voice to reveal my embarrassing secret if I didn't. I haven't thought of Edward as family since then. There was such a thing? Why didn't you tell me? You only believed Edward, didn't you? I dated his friend but focused on my studies, refusing to meet him. Only when I got good grades did you finally notice me. That relationship naturally fizzled out. That's terrible. Mom's face turned pale, seemingly unable to accept the reality. Also, I'm going to demand compensation from Sharon. She can't get away with all the verbal abuse and unreasonable demands. As a lawyer, I'll make sure Sharon is held accountable according to the law. Mom left my room weakly, apparently unable to say anything more. Then, after a while, Sharon entered my room. Laura, I'm glad it wasn't serious. From now on, I'll be more considerate of you, so... Did Mom tell you about the compensation? Your apology won't change my mind. As I spoke coldly, Sharon's expression changed, and she vented her anger at me. What? I'm trying to reflect and change my heart. Don't you get it? Do you call that a repentant attitude? No matter how many times you apologize, I'll never believe it's sincere. Please leave. If she were truly repentant, she would strive to be forgiven. But Sharon clicked her tongue and left the room, saying, apologizing was a waste. I'd rather receive proper compensation than accept a half-hearted apology. I have no intention of forgiving Sharon. Despite still feeling unwell, I packed my things that day and left the house the next. I had secretly installed small surveillance cameras inside and outside my room after my brother's family moved in and started behaving arrogantly. I was leaving the house, but I wanted to make them pay. I always recorded conversations with Sharon on a voice recorder, gathering various evidence. Grabbing me by the collar could be assault, and threatening to kick me out of the house and making unjust demands could constitute coercion. Though it was a family matter, the police weren't eager to get involved. So I decided to claim damages for the mental anguish Sharon caused me. I thought it would be a minor payment, but the outcome was more than I expected. I contacted Senior Lita and learned what happened next. Sharon, it seems, started relieving stress at casinos and going to dance clubs as revenge for being shunned by mothers of her child's friends. About half of the class, 13 people, disliked her, and her bad reputation spread among the other mothers. Furthermore, she stole money from Mom's purse, incurred debts, and maxed out credit cards. Edward, furious, sold all of Sharon's branded goods, which led to her exploding in anger. Every day, the couple had huge fights, causing Freddie to cry a lot. Dad took care of Freddie and apparently kicked the couple out of the house. Even as Edward's business faltered and he was begging banks for loans, my demand for compensation set him into a panic. I don't care what happens to them, but I do want them to pay the compensation. It took time, but once the money was transferred, I blocked my parents' and brother's phone numbers. I'll never see them as family again. Now, I'm focusing on my work and valuing my time more than ever. Being estranged from my family might disadvantage me if I marry, but it's better than tolerating unpleasant people. Maybe someday, someone who doesn't mind my estrangement from my family will appear. Believing in such a meeting, I've decided to keep looking forward.